So I'm going to give you the really short version of who I actually am, because Arnie likes to talk, eh? And, so my name's Clinton Schultz. I'm a psychologist who happens to be Aboriginal. I'm a Gamilaroi man, so my mob are from northwest New South Wales. My mob are actually from a place that these days is called Lake Keepit, sort of just outside Gunnedah. I've spent most of my life on the Gold Coast though, and in North Brisbane. So that's the short version. I'll leave it there because usually I'll talk about myself half the day. Okay, so what I've come along to talk about is this model of social emotional wellbeing that quite a few of us members of AIPA have been working on for quite a while now, and it's been evolving constantly for several years now until it's got to this. And to get to here, as Pat said, the groundwork was all done starting back in 1989 with the National Aboriginal Health Strategy, and then 1995 with the Ways Forward report, and then the social emotional wellbeing framework that was in place 2004-2009, which is being worked on presently, renewed presently. So that's a lot of the background information that's led to this. The first thing you need to realise about social emotional wellbeing when it's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people talking about it, I'm just going to say Aboriginal because I'm Aboriginal, and so I don't want to talk on behalf of Torres Strait Islander people. When we're talking about Aboriginal social emotional wellbeing, it's vastly different than the term social emotional wellbeing that gets utilised globally throughout mental health. So if you actually Google social emotional wellbeing, your first 50 hits or so will come up from international papers all to do with mental health. Whereas Aboriginal social emotional wellbeing is a much larger and holistic concept that takes into consideration all those elements of people's being, such as culture, land, etc., etc. So I'm going to run through all of these and just give a quick rundown because I've only got 7.5 minutes left or something, and how they all sort of fit together, how they all fit together, and how they all have a constant interplay on each other. So the best way for you guys to wrap your heads around this thing is to think of it like a wheel, laid out exactly like the wheel on your car. So at the centre there, you've got your hub or your nuts that hold everything stable. Everything's held together by that there. So you can put whatever word you want in there. We've put holistic social emotional wellbeing just to help people not confuse it with other uses of social emotional wellbeing that are around. And then if you think of these domains that are sort of sitting out here, think of those like the spokes on your wheel. So those spokes obviously help to keep the hub and everything strong and keep that nut and everything in place. So those spokes are all part of this one great model. So here you can see we've got connection to physical well-being. So the way this is structured is we've started with the individual. So looking at those aspects that are related to individual experience, individual well-being, and then we sort of work out from there and start taking into consideration those elements of family and community and culture, etc., until we get out to country. So connection to physical well-being. As an Aboriginal man, as a Gamilaroi man, when I think of physical well-being, yes, I'm considering all those elements of physical health and well-being that we'd usually consider: nutrition, healthy lifestyle, not being exposed to chronic disease, etc., all those elements. But also when I'm thinking about physical well-being from an Aboriginal perspective, I'm thinking of it as the body is a vessel. So that connection of body to spirit is also very important. So connection to mental and emotional well-being. So first I'll give you an example of physical well-being, what I'm talking about there. So I surf a lot, I engage in a lot of sport. I also ride a motorbike. I'm going to touch a table, something wood here before I keep going. I could at some stage have a motorbike accident which could lead to me losing my leg, for instance, which would mean I would not be able to continue with the everyday activities that I enjoy doing in my life that help form my identity as that person. So that's also what a part of physical well-being to us, which starts to reach into that mental and emotional. So starts to obviously connect with that mental and emotional side also. So beyond all the psychological and emotional factors that we generally think of in terms of mental and emotional well-being, once again, as a Gamilaroi man, when I'm talking about connection to my emotional or my mental state. I'm talking about my ability to just sit and be at peace with my thoughts. So if I'm at unease at any stage, there'll be certain places that I can go where I can just sit and I can listen to what's going on around me. It might be my ancestors talking to me, it might be the birds, it could just be the trees. I can process all that information. Now, if I was to lose that ability, that would lead to quite a lot of instability for me, because it's an important part of who I am and of my identity. So we need to start thinking, I guess, outside of those usual elements of biological or physiological health that we generally consider, because for all peoples of ethnically diverse or culturally diverse backgrounds, and particularly Aboriginal people, there's other issues, there's other areas that are of great importance to us. So connection to family and kinship. So when we're yarning about family, it's a much grander concept than, I guess, many people are used to in an individualistic society. So Australia recently was voted as the second most individualistic society on the planet, just behind the US. They only just pipped us. But when you're talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, you've got some of the most collectivist societies that you'll come across globally. So polar differences there. So when we're talking about family, we're not talking just about that nuclear unit. We're talking about family that's been established through processes of removal and people having to establish new families. We're talking about family through processes of kinship and law and the constructions that go around those. We're talking about families based around concepts of respect and endearment. So anybody I hold great respect for is just as much my family as my direct brother or sister are. So we've got a lot more connections with a lot more people a lot of the time. Connection to community. So when we're considering community, once again, it's one of these terms that can have many different meanings when you're talking to Aboriginal people. So I could be talking about my geographic community. So I'm a member of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community on the Gold Coast, because that's where I live. I could be talking about my heritage community. So I'm a Gamilaroi man, so I could be talking about that community. I could be using it in a generalised term to talk when I'm talking about engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So I might just be saying, yeah, I've got to go have a yarn to community. What I'm actually saying is I've just got to go have a yarn with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So there's many different ways that word community will also be utilised, or people will understand, and each is just as valid and each is just as important. It's not up to us to establish what these definitions should be. It's up to each individual to construct these ideals for themselves. So culture, generally when we're talking about culture, people consider things like language. Language is obviously the most important part of most people's culture. But also law for us. So LORE, everybody would have heard LORE, law, Aboriginal concept of law, which is vastly different to LAW. Our law is based on ancient principles of respect and understanding, and it's been unchanged since the beginning of time. So everybody's aware of what it is, whereas LAW seems to change every couple of days and nobody can ever keep up with new legislations. So it can be very confusing for people. But it also includes our song, our dance, our arts and all that sort of stuff, all those elements that make us Aboriginal peoples. And connection to land or connection to country. You'll also hear people use the words connection to nature or connection to environment in there, particularly people who unfortunately have been removed and haven't had the opportunity or the chance to get back to country, to meet their mob or to engage with their peoples. So that you'll find a lot of people will still have this inherent, very strong connection to nature or to the environment. So people might just like being at the beach. They don't really know why, they've just always felt safe at the beach. For some people that I engage with, it's their garden. They just feel comfortable and safe in their garden. That's the exact same connection to country as I experience as a Gamilaroi man when I've got my feet rubbing in the dirt around Lake Keepit. It's the exact same thing. We can't minimalise the experiences that people that have around country, connection to country, because unfortunately not everybody has had the opportunity to feel that experience of connection to country, and they've had to forge new ways of instilling some of that connection for themselves. And then connection to spirituality and ancestors, and this is a section that sometimes raises some concerns for people because they go, spirituality. So when people try and label what spirituality should be sometimes, for me and for many other people who work in this area, spirituality is just a set of beliefs and a set of principles that people are guided by and believe in. It doesn't matter if it's, our beliefs in the dreaming or people's beliefs in the Bible and Christianity, or even people's steadfast belief in science. It's a set of beliefs, it's a set of principles, it's a set of ways they understand themselves in the environments that they're in. And they're all just as valid as each other. So for instance, if I went somewhere like Yarrabah and I polled people up there, what's spirituality to you? I'd be likely to get everything back from a strong connection to country, or a strong connection to my dreaming, to a strong connection with Christ and with my religion. And each one is exactly, or is just as strongly valid as each other. And it's not up to us to determine what spirituality is for individuals. So I guess one of the real strengths of this model is that it is inclusive. We're not trying to look for, we're not trying to put variance aside. We're trying to be welcoming of that variance and establish that everybody has got some levels of this variance within them. And it's really then about the experiences and expressions that people have to these connections that drive some of these mental health concerns. So I'll give you a very quick example of that. We might have Auntie who has very strong connection to country. She knows where her mob is. She's always known where her people have come from. But yet there might be a native title dispute going on in that area. And for whatever reason, her family might not be recognised on that native title dispute. So then she might be clashing with all the other families within that community on that country who are saying, no, your mob's not from here. Your family signed a relinquishment of Aboriginality form 2 generations ago, so they sold out. So for whatever reason, people may have negative experiences of these strong connections. Does that make sense to everyone? So, as I said, Arnie might have a really strong connection, she knows where it is, but that experience of that connection is actually quite negative because it's having an impact on her connection to community and to family. She's arguing with other people, which is obviously then that higher levels of stress is going to impact on her physical health and her mental well-being. So you can't deconstruct these issues. People are people. People are a whole. I don't think we can continue segregating parts of people when people are a whole. So those experiences then, as I said, can be negative or positive, and it's then very much about how people express those. And that's what we end up with presentations of in terms of when they get to our door. So in Arnie's case, she might be very vocal about it and argue and, it might really upset and enrage her. So obviously that's going to have a negative impact on her physical and mental well-being. But Arnie might also choose to take that as, a bit of fire and to use that energy to make sure that, policy changes occur or that education occurs in communities to explain, maybe that her family didn't sell out, that they did it to protect children and it was a way it was a form of protection rather than a selling out. And so she might use that power in that way. So therefore her expression of that experience could be positive. So you're going to have these variances across everybody. And obviously across Australia, we're no homogenous Aboriginal people. We're a makeup of many, 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 many individual nations. So this is also going to vary across every single one of those nations you go to. I'd argue it'll also vary in every single community within those nations and amongst every individual within those communities. But that's okay. That's the greatness of this, is that it allows for that.
Do you want to mention that we trialled it at that big conference, 250 Aboriginal people nationally?
Yeah, so we put this to 250 social emotional wellbeing workers, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social emotional wellbeing workers earlier this year or late last year. I don't even know what month we're in at the moment. And there was an overwhelming positive response to it. Everybody just got it. But I also use it with a lot of my non-Indigenous clients. And it works for them as well. And I also do a lot of education with non-Indigenous practitioners. And they go, wow, I can use this with any of my clients. And I think that's a wonderful step to start utilising Aboriginal knowledges and transferring that into a mainstream context instead of always expecting Aboriginal people to work in mainstream
Or come in
ways.
with the deficit, that we can bring richness to the dialogue.
Yeah.
And,
So then social determinants, cultural determinants, political determinants, these all act, I guess, either as protective or risk factors to something occurring to these connections. So for instance, if we took the social determinant of unemployment, for instance, if I've got it, or of employment. So if I'm employed and I'm doing quite well, I can afford my rent, everything's going okay for me, it'll probably act like a tyre, protecting that hub, protecting that mechanism. But if I'm unemployed, well then that social determinant is then going to act like a nail. And it doesn't matter where that nail sticks. What happens when you get a nail in a tyre? Where does the whole thing go flat, or just where you got the whole thing? So it doesn't matter where we get damage in this network. People become deflated. People become overwhelmed. People start presenting with what then gets diagnosed as clinical mental illnesses or physical illnesses, etc., when really, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they're just themselves symptoms of much larger social-emotional well-being concerns. So that's kind of where we're at with it at the moment, and it seems to be fitting with most of the people that we're presenting it with and that we're working through this with at the moment. So that's what I want to leave you guys with this afternoon. This will be, all the information about this will come out in the new Working Together textbook, the revised edition, which I don't know when we're going to have that out. I wish I could give you a date when we finish writing it. No, by second semester start for uni, because I've got like 1,000 students waiting for it, so I've got to get it done by then. Cool. So that's all I'm going to leave you with.
Thanks, both. We probably have time for one or two very quick questions.
sorry, so much for our discussion, everyone. But never mind, grab us this evening.
They'll be around.
Did you really equate a steadfast belief in science as spirituality?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why, because I had somebody that I was doing training with, and he just absolutely did not want to accept that spirituality was a part of, was important to people's, it was mental health training that I was doing. He believed in science and the rules and the regulations around science. And I simply turned to him and said, well, that's your belief system. And it's absolutely no less valid than any other belief system. I'm not talking Scientology, I'm talking steadfast belief in sets of rules and regulations that govern different fields of science. And for some people, they have a very strong belief in those principles.
They're called facts.
That's your beliefs then.
Okay.
You can have a
Yep.
think of that.
There's plenty of science that actually shows the benefit of that.
Yep.
So that's actually a narrow view of science. There's plenty of scientific research that shows that people who have those beliefs do actually have better health outcomes.
Yeah,
Whether the beliefs
and
are true or not.
As I said, I
There's science for that.
wasn't belittling any of them. I was simply informing him that that's his set of beliefs, and that's no less valid or more valid than somebody's belief in their spirituality system.
I think what shocks everyone is when it's because people think that's how things are, undisputed facts. So if you say maybe it's a set of beliefs, it's like, oh, no, they're not. That's real. So I think that's the issue.